Thank you for joining us today. Aprio, in collaboration with Fifth Third Bank, is here to support you in navigating the Paycheck Protection Program. In this segment, we're going to discuss payroll costs related to loan forgiveness for sole proprietors and independent contractors. My name is Justin Elangian, a partner here at Aprio, and I'll be joined by one of my partners, Tommy Lee. On our agenda, we're going to start by defining the covered period. And then we'll describe eligible payroll costs for loan forgiveness as relates to your employees. We'll then discuss payroll costs that are not eligible for forgiveness, also related to your employees. Then we'll have some conversation around owner compensation. This may be where you focus if you do not have any employees at all. Just hang tight and we'll get into your details when we get to owner compensation. And then we'll conclude with the timing of costs in order for them to be eligible for forgiveness.
Thanks, Justin. So we're going to start with the covered period. Now, this has been a change since the last set of regulations, but it's really made it a whole lot easier. We're still going to continue to begin the covered period on the date of loan disbursement. So this is the day that the funds hit your bank account. Now here's the change. We now get to pick a period in between 8 and 24 weeks from that date of loan disbursement. That's any period in between 8 and 24 weeks. One of the other changes that we've highlighted here at the bottom is that the alternative payroll covered period is no longer an option for either PPP number 1 or PPP number 2 loans. So payroll cost. When we think about payroll cost, we always start with cash compensation. Cash compensation is defined as gross salary, wage, bonus, commission, tips, or similar compensation, payment for vacation, family, medical, or sick leave, and allowance for dismissal or separation or severance. It's really gross wages. One of the things to note about cash compensation is that there's a limit. Employees being paid at a rate of $100,000 or more over the covered period are going to be limited to the amount that you're able to utilize for forgiveness. And that limitation is based on the number of weeks that you deploy your covered period for. We provided an example here of taking the $100,000 divided by 52 weeks times the number of weeks in the covered period. Remember, your choices here are in between 8 weeks and 24 weeks. We provided the maximum, so if you choose a 24-week covered period, then the maximum amount that you're going to get for any employee's cash compensation is $46,154.
As we look at cash compensation, that is not included in payroll costs. Equally as important to define as what Tommy described as being included in payroll costs. So let's take a closer look. Cash compensation does not include the following: amounts in excess of the $100,000 limitation discussed, federal payroll taxes, compensation to an employee whose principal place of residence is outside of the United States, payments to independent contractors, where you, as the recipient of the PPP loan, are paying somebody else via 1099. Those would not be included in payroll costs. And then wages utilized for other tax credits. namely the wages used for the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or wages that will be utilized for determining the Employee Retention Credit, now available to recipients of PPP loans. All of these costs would be excluded from payroll costs when requesting forgiveness on your PPP loan. There's also non-cash compensation that is eligible for loan forgiveness. Let's take a look at those components, as some of these have changed over time. Non-cash compensation includes the employer's share of three aspects: group healthcare coverage, retirement benefits, and state and local taxes assessed on compensation. Group healthcare coverage does have some explicit criteria, which include health, dental, vision, life, disability, and if you have a self-insured plan, those would count here too. It's important to note that the non-cash compensation paid to employees is not subject to the $100,000 limitation previously discussed. Tell me, anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, Justin, I would just highlight this last bullet of this not being subject to the $100,000 limitation. We get this question a lot. Folks come in, they have an employee that's been paid the $100,000. They have these other items, group healthcare, retirement plan benefits. There's no limitation on this. It's actually added to the amount above $100,000. So that's the only thing I'd really have to add there.
Yeah, Tommy, that's a good point. Thanks for mentioning that. Now, as we look at owner compensation, a little bit different here than what you see for employee compensation. Let's take a look at the cash compensation component first. Can you take us through this one, Tommy?
Yeah, Justin, thanks. So for owner compensation for sole proprietors, this is relatively straightforward. If your compensation for the year in which you applied for the loan was greater than $100,000, the full amount of forgiveness that you're going to get is the $20,833. The only time you really care and have to calculate anything is if that owner compensation you used in your application was less than $100,000. At that point in time, you're going to use that number, divide it by 12, times it by 2.5, and that's the max forgiveness that you're going to get. Justin, anything to add here?
I would just mention that the compensation used for calculating the loan amount could be 2019 or 2020. So just make sure that when you're looking at this, if you're doing that 2.5 months worth calculation, that you're going back to the year that you used to calculate your loan amount when looking at this limitation.
So owner non-cash compensation. Well, if you thought cash compensation was easy, this is even going to be easier because the non-cash compensation isn't applicable as it relates to sole proprietors. So if there is no forgiveness provided for employer-paid retirement plan contributions, and there is no forgiveness provided for employer-paid healthcare coverage for owners.
Now, as we look at timing and when those costs need to be either paid or incurred to be eligible for loan forgiveness. For payroll costs, whether it's cash or non-cash compensation, we would get to include in our forgiveness request those costs that were paid during the covered period, which is either the period between 8 and 24 weeks from the date you received your funds, or those that were incurred during that covered period and paid subsequent to the end of the covered period, as long as they were paid by the next regularly scheduled payroll or billing cycle. It's important to note that contributions of retirement benefits and group healthcare benefits that were accelerated from periods outside of the covered period are not eligible for loan forgiveness. Said differently, you cannot prepay contributions of retirement benefits or group healthcare benefits and then request forgiveness on those amounts. That's going to conclude this segment. We hope this information provides clarity on payroll costs that are eligible for loan forgiveness. On behalf of Fifth Third Bank, Tommy, myself, and all of us here at Aprio, we appreciate your time, and please utilize the other resources on the website in navigating loan forgiveness for the Paycheck Protection Program.